Hi Year 12, during our lesson today we are going to be exploring the different types of packaging materials that do exist to package our food products, and this is a continuation of our last lesson where we are really looking at packaging, storage and distribution, which is part of that food manufacture syllabus. So in our last lesson we did have a look at the functions of packaging, and this is represented through the acronym PICUP. Okay, so just to recall that content, we know that P stands for protect, I stands for inform, C stands for contain, the other C stands for convenience, and that P stands for preserve. So when we develop our understanding of the functions of packaging and the role that it plays, we need to keep PICUP as the acronym in mind, and that will really help us to remember the 5 functions of packaging for our food products. Now, the second part of this dot point does explore the types of packaging materials that are available. So types of packaging materials will be covered in our lecture today, and I'd like for you to have your yellow booklet in front of you and annotate the slides that I've printed off that match the slides that are in front of you in this video. Now, as I've already mentioned, choosing the best packaging is really dependent upon fulfilling the functions of packaging, so applying that PICUP acronym, but also considering the food product that is being packaged. So different food products have different packaging, and this must be really dependent upon the food product itself. So the reason why there's variances in food packaging is because food products are all different and they all have different characteristics that must be managed through the packaging. Now, packaging is selected according to a number of different factors. The first one is the characteristics of the food, okay, and the likelihood of spoilage or the loss of quality from physical damage, microbial growth, and enzymatic activity. Now, the next one is actually the desired shelf life of the food. And if we have a look at an example of canned foods, we know that the shelf life of a canned product is 2 years. Okay, so for a product to last for 2 years, it has to be packaged in a can. And if we have, for example, mangoes packaged in a can can last for 2 years, but if they're packaged in a Ziploc plastic pouch, then they definitely will not have that shelf life. So shelf life is a reflection of the packaging itself. Another good example is that non-perishable food items, so those food products that do have a long shelf life, okay, so they do retain their freshness and their quality for an extended period of time. These are foods like dried herbs, spices, sauces, and canned foods. They require the most durable type of packaging. The reason why is they need to be able to last on a shelf for a long time. And packaging needs to be durable, it needs to be sturdy, and it needs to be able to withstand all of these factors that have been identified above. Okay, so they need to be able to withstand things like physical damage, microbial growth, and enzymatic activity in order to have a really long shelf life. Now, on the flip side to that, we do have perishable food products. So if we have a think about what perishable foods are, these are things like milk, cheese, eggs, yogurt, and all of these food products do not last for an extended period of time. Fruit and veg are other examples of perishable foods, as well as meat. So these products, as well as bread and meat, as I've said here, require short-term protection because they don't have a long shelf life and they don't really need to be preserved for an extended period of time. So it's important to understand that the characteristics of the food do determine the packaging that is involved in the product. Now, looking at choosing the best packaging, food manufacturers need to understand that consumers are using their food products, and the packaging needs to be quite convenient in some cases, and it needs to be able to be stored efficiently where appropriate. So a really good example of this is actually salt and pepper. So we can see here that a salt and pepper product needs to be ground up, and therefore the packaging must have a grinding device so that the consumer can actually use the rock salt and the peppercorns that are packaged inside the jars. So Master Foods here have chosen to have a very, very functional package that does enable the user to use the product very effectively. Let me just spell package correctly for you. Okay, now the other important thing to know is that some manufacturers like to have their products stand out and have a real point of difference to set their products apart from others on the marketplace. So we see another example here. Legos have made this bolognese sauce, a tomato sauce product similar to passata. Now typically we know that a passata bottle would probably represent this kind of shape, and the label would be on there. Okay, it would be more of a cylindrical bottle, and it does have that kind of shape. But Legos have decided to adopt the square-shaped pasta sauce jar, which does enable their product to stand out. Now, the next example that we can see is that cost is a big factor. So packaging can be expensive, and it can pass on quite a considerable cost to the consumer. So companies need to work out if they are prepared to spend a lot of money on packaging, because at the end of the day, the consumer will be paying for this cost. This slide is a double up, so we're just going to move straight along to the next slide. Now, if we think about standard packaging that is mass produced by companies, this kind of packaging is far less expensive for companies compared to customized packaging. Now, a really good example of this is if we think about Arnott's. They package their Tim Tams using a cellophane wrap, and we have seen videos where they are these really, really big rolls, and the rolls do contain many, many thousands of cellophane wrap. And this is very, very cost effective for the company. Now, another point that needs to be raised is that packaging does come in all shapes and sizes and is unique, and does sometimes require specialized equipment to produce, depending on the product itself. Therefore, packaging that can be applied to a variety of products, for example, if we think about a canned food, so cans as packaging used by SPC Ardmona can be used across all of their canned fruit and vegetable ranges. So if we think about for a second the fact that SPC Ardmona have canned tomatoes, they have canned pears, they have canned peaches, they have canned apple pie, the pie mix. There are 4 products that utilize the same package. Now, what this does is it achieves economies of scale, okay? Because it means that that company is producing a really, really large volume of a product, and it means that they can save money because they are purchasing the packaging in a very, very large quantity. This also does save a lot of time in production because the packaging stage of production would be the same for tomatoes, pears, peaches, apple pie at SPC Ardmona. So they wouldn't really have to replace the packaging if they are producing all of these products. And this means that no time is spent to change the packaging over lines, and it also means that packaging that is new isn't really created, and it therefore also saves quite a bit of money. Now, some food products also react with packaging, and we did mention this in class. We looked at canned apricots. Now, we do know that canned apricots have a lacquer inner coating, and this is a white coating that's on the inside of the aluminium can. Now, the reason why it does have this lacquer coating, excuse this messy writing, is because high acidity foods like apricots do corrode and rust metal cans, and therefore this becomes an unsafe food product for consumers. So manufacturers really need to consider the safety of food products, and as mentioned here, high acidic foods have a laminated can, okay, or a lacquered inner coating to ensure that it does prevent corrosion or rust, okay. Now, another factor that must be considered by companies is the environmental impact that packaging can have, and particularly this is known for plastic. So plastic takes many, many years to break down. It is a manufactured material, that means it's man-made, and it is used in a lot of food packaging. However, it is not sustainable. Okay, so it is not good for our environment. Now, packaging manufacturers have to keep this in mind when choosing packaging to meet the needs of consumers, particularly those who are demanding sustainable packaging designs. So for example, there are 3 really good examples. PET plastic, glass and paperboard are the most environmentally friendly types of packaging compared to other types. And we're going to be looking at these in our lecture today. Now, we're going to have a look at different types of packaging to start with. And it's important to understand that a lot of food products that we purchase and that we interact with can contain something called combination packages. This basically means that there are 2 or more separate packaging materials involved. The best way to think of this is if you think about a box of muesli bars. Okay, so you do have 6 muesli bars generally in a packet. Okay, so these muesli bars are contained in a box, and these boxes usually contain 6 muesli bars. So this shows that there is combination packaging, because you don't only have packaging around the muesli bar itself, but you also have packaging that houses all the muesli bars. So you have that outer cardboard box. So there are 2 types of packaging, which makes this example of muesli bars a combination package. Now, not all food products have this, and companies that are trying to be more sustainable are trying to reduce this. And a really good example of that is Cadbury. So Cadbury, they're blocks of chocolate. They actually don't have multiple layers of packaging because they're trying to be a little bit more sustainable and just have that one layer. Whereas many years ago, you used to have a cardboard box around an aluminium alfoil, which was used to preserve the chocolate. Now, another really good example that I've included here is breakfast cereals. So breakfast cereals are packaged firstly in a plastic bag. So if you think about your Cocoa Pops or your Wheat Bix, they first have the plastic bag to protect against humidity and oxidation. Now, after that, it does have a paperboard box, and this is mainly for ease of handling. Okay, so it does enable the cereal to be handled easily, stored easily, and also transported easily. Now, you need to be aware of 3 types of or layers of packaging. Firstly, we have primary packaging. Now, primary packaging is the food package in which the food is sold to the consumer. Okay, so a good example of this would be the cardboard box around the muesli bars, as well as the actual plastic coating around the individual muesli bars. So these 2 examples are the primary packaging, because we as consumers are given these types of packaging. Now, the second type of packaging is secondary packaging. Now, this is basically the cardboard carton, which holds many, many packages and makes handling easy in the warehouse. So imagine that you've got lots and lots of boxes of muesli bars in a bigger box, and it does contain maybe a 24 pack of the 6 boxes of muesli bars. So this does ease handling in a warehouse. The final type of packaging is tertiary packaging, and this is where you are securing multiples of the secondary packaging for ease of bulk, okay, or large quantity handling and distribution. For example, if you have many, many boxes of these 24 packs of muesli bars and they were shrink wrapped together, the shrink wrapping of pallets of these muesli bars is an example of that tertiary packaging. Now, this has been taken from your textbook, and it is table 14.2. And it's important to know that there are 4 main materials used for food packaging in the Australian food industry. We will be going through each of those in our lecture today. So the first type of packaging is glass. Now, this is typically used for bottles and jars, and these are used for things like jam or pasta sauce. The second type of packaging is plastic. So plastic is basically used for a multitude of products. And if you think about fresh meat products like salami or trays of chicken breast or mince, flexible packaging is used for things like oats or rice, and rigid plastic packaging is used for things such as plastic bottles. It might be for aioli sauce, or it might be for mayonnaise, as well as molded tubs. So if you think about things like cream cheese tubs or little dips and spreads that would be in a plastic molded tub. The third type of packaging is paper and board. So paper bags can be used for things like sugar and flour. Paperboard can be used to package things like boxes of tea bags or even egg cartons. And laminates do incorporate paperboard, and these can be multi-ply board boxes such as long life milk products, custard, or even Tetra Packs of juice. The final type of packaging is metals, and metals are used often through aluminium foil. So if you think about a chocolate bar, like a dairy milk, that utilizes aluminium foil. Cans, so aluminium and steel, these are used for canned fruits and vegetables. And the next one is metallicized plastic. So if you think about potato chips, these do come in a plastic bag, but it does have metal incorporated as well. And these really prevent the rancidity or the oxidation of fats, and they block out sunlight. So metal is combined with plastic in this instance. So what we're going to do firstly is have a look at cans as our first type of packaging. So the most common types of cans that we see are broken into two main categories. Go back. So we've got steel cans and we also have aluminium cans. So steel cans are used for solid and semi-solid foods. So if you think about things like vegetables and fruit, while aluminium cans are used for beer and soft drinks. So if we think about Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Now the steel can is generally coated with a thin layer of tin, and this tin acts as a barrier between the steel and the food, and it does minimize the risk of the food reacting with the steel. So that is quite important. This therefore tries to minimize or reduce corrosion. Now, foods that have a high acid content also refer a special coating which does ensure that the package is inert. Now, try and remember what that word inert means. We have used it before. The word inert means non-reactive. Now, another point is that it's not advisable to use the contents of dented or damaged cans because microscopic holes might be present. And this can lend to a disease which is a foodborne illness such as botulism. And this is something we have already spoken about in class. Now there's a really good image here, and this is taken from our old textbook. And it does show that the general kind of layout of a can and how it does become formed. So you can see here that there is a cross section here of a can. So imagine if this can was cut open and we were able to examine it under a microscope. You would see that the outside layer is tin, the inside layer is tin, but there's also an enamel coating, and that prevents oxidation or corrosion. And then in between there is a combination of tin and steel and iron. So that really showcases that there are different components present in a can. Now, another important point to know is that the top of the can has a double seam. So I'll just delete this text so that you can see that really clearly. So as I was saying, the double seam is basically that curl at the top of the can. And this does enable the can to be airtight sealed. So when we talk about those principles of preservation, the exclusion of air in a can is definitely one of the principles of preservation that can be applied when canning. And it's important that you've got that written down and that you do know that, because if you get a question about canning and you're trying to apply that TREP acronym, you can definitely refer to that double seam on the outer layer of the can and the fact that it does produce an airtight seal and extends the shelf life of food. The other components I'll give you a chance to have a look at, but if we look at the corrugation of the side and the lid, so the corrugation is basically those grooves. This does help to provide strength in the can, which does help to stop it from denting and becoming affected by that vertical impact if a can is dropped or if it is affected physically. So just take a few minutes to write down the notes on this slide and make sure you're across those, particularly when it comes time to updating your study notes. Now there are different cans used for different foods, and we have spoken about this already. Now it's important to understand the most acidic foods that are canned are things like berries, cherries, apple juice and tomatoes. So these require a lacquered can. Okay, so that's a can with that internal lacquered coating, so that white coating on the inside of the can. And this does ensure that it does not corrode. The next category of foods are those which are mildly acidic or they're medium acidity. So apricots, peaches, baked beans in tomato sauce. These products do need to have a partially lacquered can or a wholly lacquered can because they do have the capacity to corrode. The last example are things like peas, corn, fish and meat. These are very low acidity, so the food product only reacts with the can once it's been opened, which is why we shouldn't store food in cans. They should be stored in separate containers. But you will notice that if you look at the inside of a tuna can, if you look at the inside of a peas and corn can, then these will not have that white lacquer coating because they are very, very low acidity. And if we look at that on a pH scale of 0 to 14, they are around the 7 range, okay, or they're upward from 7. So let's start looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of the different types of packaging. Now, one of the best advantages for cans is the fact that it is a very inexpensive packaging material and it's quite cost effective. It's also used for a range of foods, and I did mention the economies of scale for SPC Ardmona. Cans are used across entire product ranges, and it does save the companies a lot of time because they don't need to change the packaging on the production lines during the manufacturing process. The next one is the fact that it does provide a lot of protection for the contents or the food within, and it does prevent undesirable gains or losses in moisture content. So any moisture that is within a can will stay there until the product is opened. Cans are very easy to handle in terms of filling, sealing and packaging. So it is an efficient packaging method for manufacturers like SPC Ardmona. They can be displayed really easily and stacked neatly on shelves because of their shape and because of their size. They can be stored for a really long period of time. Okay, so 2 years is the shelf life for canned foods. So they do assist with that preservation process. The last one is that steel cans are impact resistant, which means they are not susceptible to denting. So the denting chance is very low. And they're virtually unbreakable, so they're very strong and they are very durable. The benefits of canning are furthermore shown through this image. We've looked at stability, we've looked at the fact that they do have a long shelf life, a minimum of 2 years, but there are furthermore other benefits of canning shown here. They don't need to be kept refrigerated, so it does use less energy in the supply chain and in transport. So canned foods don't need to be transported on refrigerated trucks and freight. They are easy to store and very quick to prepare. There are few preservatives in a can. The reason why, they do rely on 2 principles of TREP, and if you can remember what they are, one of them is temperature control, because cans are heated to a high temperature. And the other one is the restriction, the exclusion of air, okay? And by exclusion of air, or excluding air, it means that the cans are vacuum sealed, which means air is excluded and there is no need to include preservatives in the food product. The final one is easy opening, particularly with pull-off lids or with even ring pull cans. So if you can add that to your notes here. This obviously doesn't showcase the ring pull can, but just imagine there's a little ring pull on here, and that does show one of the other benefits of canning. The last packaging we're going to look at in this lecture is glass containers. Now, glass is used for a range of different food products, from semi-solid foods, liquid foods to solid foods. Now, glass jars are generally aseptically sterilized. Okay, so this means that the contents are sterilized before being placed in the jar. Okay, so because it is A, sterilization occurs first letter of the alphabet, A, aseptic. So just remember that little trick. So it basically means that the food contents are hot, they're already sterilized, the jars are hot filled, and it does allow for vacuum sealing. Now, if they have not been hot filled and it's more of a conventional bottling process, pasteurization of high acid foods such as fruits and pickles is required. And we know that pasteurization, just to keep us informed, is heating a food product to 72 degrees for 10 to 15 seconds. Now, it's important to also understand that when bottling food products in a glass container, the temperature needs to be at least 85 degrees Celsius, and this does help to destroy microorganisms. And another point is that low acid foods like meat, fish, and baby food need to undergo sterilization because they don't have acids present, they don't have that low pH environment, which is not desirable for microorganisms. So there is a greater risk of microbial growth in these foods, and these foods need to be heated to a much higher temperature so that all the microorganisms are destroyed. Care must be taken, however, when conveying glass through a filling process in a manufacturing plant, because glass is very susceptible to breakage as well as surface damage. So this is an extremely important thing to note here. Now let's look at the advantages of using glass. The first one is that glass is chemically inert. So this means it is non-reactive. It does not react with foods and it doesn't produce flavor change. So it does keep the quality of the food product, and all of the sensory properties are maintained, including taste. Glass is impermeable and it's non-porous, okay, which makes it even more safe. It's odorless, it doesn't develop a smell, and it's very hygienic. It's usually transparent, which means you can see through it and you can have a look at the contents of what's inside the bottle. This means that the contents can be inspected at the time of packaging and at the point of purchase. Glass is very strong. Even though it's breakable, it is strong. It's easy to open and reseal, and it also can come in a range of different shapes, sizes, and colors. It does enable long-term storage and an extended shelf life, and glass can be recycled and it can be reused. And if we think here of the Makona case study of upcycling, those mason jars that they use in their packaging are made of glass. So we're going to finish off our lecture here, and in our next lesson, Year 12, we're going to have a look at the remaining types of packaging. What I would like for you to do now is to go onto the Google Classroom and to complete the activities that flow on from this lecture.